Hi, my name is Ivan, and in this video, I would like to share with you some of the responses, the interview responses, and contrast the good response versus the bad response for some of the um, soft skill questions, and specifically the leadership principle questions. Why am I doing this? So I've spent a couple of decades in the tech industry. I work for top tech companies, Amazon, Facebook. I worked for a number of startups. Most recently, I was an executive at Assurance IQ, which is a fintech startup. And so I decided to share some of my experiences just to make sure that people, when they come to the interviews, they know what the expectations are and they know how to structure their responses and actually prepare for those interviews. So I've actually created a course for everyone to be able to join and to get a lot more details. You can find a link in the description below. But in this example, what I would like to go is to look at the set of simple questions and responses for the principle of ownership. Specifically, I'm going to pick one of the ones that is not a good response. So this is actually one of the scenarios from my course. And then I will look at some of a better response. So in this case, we have a question. Can you provide an example of a time when you took ownership of a project from start to finish? This is a very common question during the interviews. It has different variations of it. Talk to me about a project that you managed or executed, etc. So there's a variety of different flavors of how this particular question may be asked. So in this particular response, simple response, I have prepared these responses based on my personal experience conducting like 2,000 interviews over the last couple of decades, including several hundred at Amazon as a bar raiser. So I have a pretty good understanding what candidates say and what we as interviewers expect them the information to provide. So in this case, the candidate or, the made up candidate responds in this way. So our team was assigned a critical project with a tight deadline, and the initial project manager left the company suddenly. So one of the main thing that the candidates fail to explain, usually when the question specifically asks, like, talk to me about the project under where you had to work under tight timelines, etc. They fail to explain why the timelines were tight or not enough time, etc. Remember, as an interviewer, I don't have any context, or the interviewers don't have any context about your place of work, the environment, the project, the scope of the project, the capacity of the team, etc. So you have to, as a candidate, put everything into perspective, right, and provide at least some relative comparison of why do you think the timeline was tight? What was the scope? What was the capacity? What was originally planned for? And how much time you actually had to execute on this? So in this example, I would look at, hey, we have, for example, X weeks or months to execute a project, but the scope required, given our team's capacity, maybe double that amount or whatever, whatever the explanation is. And then probably follow up with some more details on the scope and why do you think it was much bigger than the timeline that you had. The other thing is, it's important in this case is to articulate why it was a critical project, why you couldn't, for example, extend the timelines, why you couldn't reprioritize some of the other things, etc. So put that into perspective as well. All right, so the individual then says that I volunteered to take over the project management responsibilities to ensure its completion. Okay, that's good. The follow-up question that I typically ask, and I've seen a lot of other interviewers ask, is why was it important to you personally, right? So if you volunteer for something, and keep in mind, the better responses are, or the better examples are, is when you are taking an action where when you're stepping forward and you are driving something as opposed to being told to do something, right? So when you do that, those responses usually stand out a lot better than the ones where you're just being asked to do X and you're just doing X, right? So, but you have to have a very clear explanation of why it was important to you personally, what was the motivating factor for you to take on that initiative and drive that forward. For example, maybe uh, there was a particular a vetted interest from your perspective to not let the team down. For example, if the team morale goes down, then you may be required to spend extra effort to finding the right people for your team and the good people for your team, and you didn't want your team to disintegrate, etc. So there could be some of the personal things that you also are looking for to get that additional motivation. Okay, so next, uh, moving on with the next response. So I quickly got up to speed with the project details, reallocated resources, set clear milestones, and communicated regularly with stakeholders to keep everyone informed. So I've seen that kind of response way too many times, and I would usually ask for a lot more details because this is just, I don't know, just standard project management thing. Everybody does that. So it doesn't stand out among all the other candidates in any particular way. So don't even bother saying those generic words. Instead, provide some more details and context. That would be much better. What cadence you had for the working group, why it was sufficient, why it was not aggressive, kind of sprinkle a little bit your philosophy that you think is going to work, but don't overwhelm the interviewer. Keep in mind the interviewer still need to have um, some time or have the ability to ask some of the follow-up questions. So this is one of the worst thing that you can do as a candidate, not manage your time appropriately and ramble for too long, where an interviewer doesn't have a chance to ask follow-up questions and ends up not collecting the data points that the interviewer was assigned to collect from that interview, and failing you, essentially saying, I don't know anything. I wasn't able to collect the data points I was assigned to, so I can't make a decision. So that happens very often during the interviews, and like, for example, at Amazon and a lot of other companies, it was okay to pass on potentially good candidate if you don't have data points supporting that. So the candidate may be good, but you weren't able to establish that it was a good candidate during the interview process. And so it was okay to basically pass on that candidate when you don't have enough data points, as opposed to making a bad hiring decision, because that was considered a lot worse. So, if you don't let the interviewer as a candidate to give a chance to ask follow-up questions and collect the information they're looking for, you are actually hurting your performance on the interview. And you may be a fantastic candidate for the team, maybe a good fit, etc., but they won't know about that. And so please make sure that you are respecting that time and giving them a chance to ask follow-up questions. All right, so, and then next, the the candidate goes into the project was completed on time within budget, received positive feedback to stakeholders for smooth transition and successful delivery. So again, I've seen that happen quite a few times. This is a disaster response, I would say. It's just it is so bad, and especially if you're interviewing for Amazon, what they're looking for is data, metrics, objective metrics, preferably. So not a bunch of adjectives that describe how successful your project was. They want to establish that opinion themselves by looking at the data. So as much as you can share that and convince them that you, in fact, achieved those results and were deeply involved with the project, the better it will be for you during the debrief time. The other thing is, there's a very bold claim here, result at the sort of result statement, that the candidate says that the candidate didn't have anything that went wrong during the execution of the project. If you were executing on a complex project, either project was too simple, right? Then it kind of questions why did you bring the story up in the first place? But if the project was complex, there's always things happen that maybe they're not, completely getting taking the project entirely off the rails, but there's always things happen that don't go as planned. It's better if you highlight those things and how you dealt with them, because what they're looking for here in ownership principle, in particular, is they're looking for your ability to rise above the circumstances and be able to problem solve and find a way out and execute on it and complete and get it done, right? If everything was smooth sailing, which rarely happens in the real world, then it's not probably a good story to highlight your ability to problem solve, go above and beyond, and be able to work through some of the problems that arise during the execution on a complex project. So anyway, so that's kind of my take on a response like this. And keep in mind, this is something that I did see quite often from some of the candidates. Obviously, those candidates didn't get hired. And then I'm going to take a look at maybe another example that I think if there is more realistic details. Again, these are made up examples. I made them up. A lot of them, the actual wording and things like that, I use ChatGPT for it, but they're fairly realistic. And if you fill those in with the right details, you can actually use that as a template to structure your response and prepare for the interviews. So like in this example for on the insisting on high standards, I'm looking at the person responding that describe a time to responding to a question. Describe a time when you identified a defect or mistake in a project. How did you address it? And the person responds that during the final review of a major software update for a flagship product, a user-facing application used by hundreds of our corporate clients, I discovered a critical bug that had been missed during previous testing phase. This bug occurred when users perform batch uploads, causing data corruption, which could have severe consequences for our clients, including loss of vital business data and operational disruptions. And so then it goes, the candidate goes into some of the details here. The immediate task was to address the defect quickly and minimize the impact. And the impact to the release schedule or harm to the users, which is what you would do. Like in the software operations, the first goal, if there is an incident, is to minimize the impact to the customers, right? First, and then work out on the permanent fix and work out on the root cause analysis then. Obviously, then do a retrospective and figure out how to prevent this from happening again in the future. All right, so, and then the candidate actually goes in there and says that additionally, I needed to identify and rectify the underlying issues in our QA process that allow such a defect to go unnoticed, which is, a great statement. Obviously, these are made up examples, but this is what I would expect from the candidate. Then goes into the root cause analysis, how the issue was uncovered. That would be the follow-up question that was a little bit unclear from that response. And then how they were able to confirm and replicate that particular issue. The candidate does mention there that basically multiple concurrent batch uploads overlapped and to overwrite the data. And that was the issue. It just didn't go as into the details of how it was discovered, right? So obviously, if you are the candidate preparing a response, keep in mind that you would be asked sometimes to go very deep into details and ask some of the minute questions or minute details about the project, so that the interviewer will have confidence that you were deeply involved in that, and it wasn't somebody else working on this. And they go through developing solution, testing, etc. So, and then, which is important here, is updating the QA process, right? So they mitigated the customer impact, and they went into the root cause analysis, which is great. They fixed it. They found what the issue was, and then they went a step further upstream to say, well, how did this happen in the first place, that we missed that critical issue? And they identified a gap in the QA process and updated the QA process as well. The only thing that was not clear from this particular response is how did they simulate a high traffic condition in the test environment, because those are usually very expensive. And so as an interviewer, I would probably ask first a leading question like, well, how did you do this? And then if the response is not adequate, then I would drill in further. So, because usually if they were able to just simulate it without actually ramping up the traffic and putting the load, that's fantastic. But if they were actually putting the load on the system to simulate those conditions through that, then I would question the efficacy of such tests and how cost effective this was. So maybe, they produced enough traffic for the scale of the system, and then test environment, the system may have been downscaled quite a bit versus production, and you could still see those effects. But anyway, obviously it's just speculating here. And then stakeholder communication, regular updates, etc. So decent response here. Feel free to use that as a template to prepare your personal stories, your personal questions. And I have a lot more here in my course on preparing for the technical interviews, specifically the soft skills questions about your past experiences, what you have done, and how to answer those questions. So if you'd like to learn more about this, please sign up to our Skool community. I do have the links in the description, and you will learn a lot more. I also have live Q&A sessions every week with some of the course members, and where I personally answer the questions directly and help out some of the individuals, essentially. So anyway, thank you. Thanks for watching.